Hello, and thank you all for joining us again here today on Adolescence County for another TTRPG talk. This video series takes a look at tabletop role-playing games and related materials, world building, and game design. Today, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at this material. This was a guide or sort of a supplement intended for 5e. Called A Life Well Lived. And the main reason why we're going to be taking a look at this is because in here there's some materials which we can use for our Lifepath series that we've been making here on the channel slowly but surely. Today we're going to be, before we jump into that though, here on our table of contents, I'm just going to talk about a little bit of what you can find in A Life Well Lived. So here, in addition to the Lifepath section and there in the first chapter, which we're going to be taking a look at today, it also includes various suggestions, different little, mini game mechanics and all kinds of various and sundry other things to help you with, downtime in camp or just downtime like in between adventures or whatnot, what your characters are up to, making allies and stuff like that. Base building, one of those things that's was used to be really common in for high level characters in, like, let's say, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Patrons, so that's that chapter 5, Who Pulls the Strings. That's primarily focuses on, as I mentioned, patrons. And then hanging up your sword, so retirement, how old characters can support as NPCs moving forward, and various and sundry things like that. Or, sometimes that occasional getting dragged back in for one last adventure. That's all that, but again, as I mentioned, today we're going to be taking a look at the Lifepath System. So here we have a basic summary. Essentially what we're going to be doing, which you can also see written up above me, is we first need to determine what our lineage is going to be, and then actually go into the Lifepath System itself, sort of building out some of the early elements of our characters' history, pulling out some skill proficiencies that they might have gained as a result of, the way that they grew up. And then, of course, continue on to class, attribute scores, and some finishing touches. Any elements in here that are pretty classic D&D when it comes to, like, the structure of creating a character, I'm probably going to skip for the sake of brevity. But a lot of the other elements I'm going to be kind of touching into, either going ahead and rolling them just to give us an idea of how this sort of functions, or at least reading over it and talking about it. So as I mentioned, here we have Lineage. What it will do is we'll roll on this D100 table, which, remember, D100 means 2D10s. And then basically this will help us pick in classic D&D, we do refer to this as the race, right? The lineage that our character's from, and that'll give us some special abilities and stuff to start. So I rolled a 49, which here would be a gnome. And again, these are the the lineages that are present in the standard SRD, partly the 5e SRD, partly to avoid problems of licensing and all that stuff. So if we flip through here, we should find, here's the page for the gnome. So of course, this is the typical stuff that you would probably get if you were picking out a standard gnome in the player's handbook. Yep. So, and of course, they describe all the other various lineages that are present in this part of the book. So again, as I mentioned, now we come to the actual life path itself. This is why we're here. So that kind of breaks it down into the various different stages. Some of these are going to be familiar for those of you who have typically played other games that have built-in life paths or have watched some of our other videos before. We have Origins. This one is specifically, in this system, they specifically take a look at the way astrology is affecting your character temperament, and then also obviously family background. Early childhood is primarily focusing on how you spent your childhood and where you spent it and how that could have affected you. Lineage, adolescence, of course, it's the teenage years. Life lesson, it basically means these are important elements and sort of decisions in your history that have affected your character's values. Pivotal moments, this is an inciting incident that has really defined and sort of structured your future moving forward. And then, of course, we have occupations and quirks. Quirks just basically are elements about you that make you unique, and your occupation is this is what you did before you became an adventurer. So obviously, we'll start off with the origin. Again, we have 12 astrological signs here. So I'll go ahead and just roll on this, and we'll take a look at that. So I rolled a 5, which is the Baylor. All right, so the traits that come along with this are brave and arrogant. And then also it gives us plus 1 strength. And then this is also known as Leo, it says here, right? So all of these are your standard astrological signs. They're just given funky things. So this element is not that similar. It's not that dissimilar from the birth signs that we had in Artesia. It's just that there's only one result instead of having various strengths and stuff like that. Now we come to our family. So we would roll here. We would say who we were raised by, the prosperity of our family, how we were raised by our family, and then family size, which will give us a number. And then here we have bonds, which presumably we would roll. It says here we should roll this between 1 and 4 times, depending upon the size of our family. So, for example, if we had a small family, we just roll once, and so on. So for our character, I rolled a 66. So that means our character was raised by gnomes, or at least one of our parents was a gnome. We were raised in a gnomish culture. And then here we had enough to get by. So we're okay, right? For our upbringing, this wants us to roll a d4. I rolled a 2, so with little attention. So basically, we were kind of ignored. Whoops, that went completely off the map. And in a relatively large family, so that kind of makes sense. Maybe we were like pretty low down in the birth order, or pretty far along in the birth order rather. So maybe we ended up getting kind of neglected by our parents just because they had to keep all those mouths fed and things didn't. We were probably raised more by our siblings than our parents probably. All right, now for a large family, they'd want us to roll the d20 3 times on that family bonds table. So I rolled a 4, which would be cherished. You have always looked to them for guidance and strength, learning from their experiences and mistakes. You can't bear to think of what life would be without them, and you swear to protect them at all costs. So this is probably like a sibling who helped raise us. I also rolled an 11, which said we're heavily involved in the wider community, perhaps in a leadership role. Sometimes their actions reflect upon you for better or for worse. So that could also be, maybe that's one of our parents. And then I also rolled a 6. Deceased. They may have succumbed to disease or age, or maybe they died an unquiet death. You are certain there is something that they never got to tell you. So our character has a member of the family who's in a significant leadership role, a member of the family that they really look up to and want to protect, and then a third family member who died, but and in unfortunate circumstances, but and there's a lack of closure there. So that's interesting. And then, of course, here it specifically mentions, right, don't feel like you should be beholden to traditional family structures. Maybe this is more of like a commune style structure. Maybe again, maybe you had mixed parentage growing up. You were raised in various different cultures. Maybe you were raised on the move, or by adopted, or like in a little colony of like street urchins or something. All right. So for the next one, this is wanting us to determine the elements of our early childhood. So first, they want us to roll an environment, and then we would roll on these pages here an event that likely occurred to us while we were growing up. I rolled a 10, which is war-torn lands. Well, that might be where our character deceased, or when that one character deceased. Oops, I went too far. Here we go. So here it wants us to roll a 1d6. And I rolled a 1. And it says, as a part of your sex recovery efforts, you spent your childhood rebuilding shattered towns and burned communities. Your strength score increases by 1. So we get +1 to strength. And we obviously grew up in not so great circumstances. This could also be why we kind of only really kind of skated by when it comes to the prosperity of our family, is because everything got destroyed at some point or another. So that would be for that one. In Adolescence, now here they want us to roll a D100 here on the Adolescence experiences table to determine how our experiences made us today. And this will give us a skill, in addition to obviously giving us some sort of background event. And I rolled a 10, which would put it here. It says you and your pet were inseparable, and you understood and connected with them on more than anyone else. And this gives us proficiency in animal handling. Okay, I rolled a 2. So blaze. So it says here, blaze. Walking home one night, you found a neighbor's home aflame as they could only watch. Did you? Oh, here we have choice. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah, this is one problem that I sometimes run into when it comes to life paths, is they don't really give you enough choice. But here, now that our character's starting to become an adult, we're getting more choice in what we do. So we have 3 different options as to things that we potentially did when we encountered this fire. The first one is try to save as much as possible from the fire, which gives us +1 to strength. Console them and keep them out of harm's way, which gives us +1 to wisdom. Or work all night to douse the flames with them, which gives us a +1 to constitution. This character is starting to feel a bit like a paladin to me, or maybe a cleric. So maybe I want to put out the fire, or maybe console them. Let's console them. Well, wait, what was our... Let me hop back real quick. I need to go back to the Baylor. Remember what these things were. Brave and arrogant. I'm going to say we tried to put out the fire. That feels more appropriate. Yeah, we tried to put out the fire, which gives us +1 to constitution. So then our next step is we need to pick out this pivotal moment. Remember, this is sort of like the defining event. So down here on the defining event table, something happened to us, and this is kind of what triggered us potentially doing things. And this will open up certain occupations that we can take. I rolled an 8, which is research expedition. So if we flip over here to research expedition, it says we can become a cartographer, a gemologist, or a stoneworker. You had no idea that your settlement was so close to an area of significant academic interest until a crew of researchers stopped to rest before reaching their destination. They sought locals to join them on their expedition, and you joined them as a cartographer, gemologist, or stoneworker, learning fascinating details about ancient civilization. In your careful excavations, you learned about archaic art forms and how to apply great pressure or delicate touch to your tools. Gain proficiency with painter's supplies, potter's tools, or light hammers. During your research, you found a bejeweled key whose design did not match the style of the civilization you were investigating. Seeing no scholarly significance to the key, the researchers allowed you to keep it. So that means, okay, painter supplies, potter's tools, or light hammers. And let's pop over. And of course, here we have the occupation, so we can pick one of those 3. let's see, the cartographer, obviously, right, you get proficiency with cartographer tools, and you also gain skill proficiency in history, and you get a 1d8 for your income moving forward. For the, what were the other ones? Gemologist here. Jeweler's tools, investigation, and again a d8. So basically, right, you're an expert in precious stones. Or if we're a stonemason or a stone worker, here we get mason's tools, we gain skill proficiency in athletics, and we only get a d4 income die instead. I'm going to say that we probably were a gemologist. Let me pop back over here and see which tools we potentially got proficiency in. Potter's tools, painter's supplies, light hammers. Yeah, I'm going to say we got with light hammers, and then our occupation is gemologist. Which gives us jeweler's tools, proficiency in investigation, and a 1d8 income die. Okay. Cool. All right. Now, of course, this last section here is quirks. So it says here, every one of us has a quirk, an aspect to our personality that makes us unique and memorable to others. You begin play with one quirk from the quirks table that holds true for the rest of your life. Think about where your quirk might have developed from. Did the experiences of your life make you this way, or does your quirk persist despite your past? Let's see, we have 20 different options, so I will go ahead and roll. Well, I mean, animal affinity would make sense considering our adolescence. 15. Naive. Maybe we got tricked to join on that little expedition. Maybe it wasn't actually really a research expedition after all. Your trusting, good-willed nature regularly fails to see the worst in others, but often leads people to underestimate your abilities. You gain a disadvantage in wisdom insight checks to determine if someone is lying to you. However, any attack rolls you make while outside of combat are made with advantage. Additionally, your innocence is very endearing to many people. Now, for the next thing, next, of course, we'd pick our class, right? So this is pretty standard. You can pick from your various and sundry classes. Then it gives us an increase to the attribute score, as stated in the descriptions here. So, which normally would be just like a skill that would be an attribute very useful to the class. So I'm gonna go with Paladin. I was already kind of leaning that way anyway. So we have a gnomish paladin. When we get +1 to either strength or charisma. We have a bunch in strength. I'm going to put this one in charisma. Now here we have the call to adventure. So we have picked our class. Now it is time for us to determine exactly what happens here. So why did we leave home? We said we roll a d10. I rolled a 7. You have a destiny you must fulfill. And then, of course, we need to decide our starting funds. Instead of using the standard starting funds, we take the income die that we had just picked for our occupation and then multiply that by whatever value it is associated with our class. So it's sort of like the starting package that you get for your class in like the player handbook. So since I picked a paladin, we get 20 gold pieces, and then we multiply that by our income die, which for me was a d8. So let's see, I rolled a 6. So that would mean basically my character would start out with 120 gold pieces. And then, of course, we do our attribute scores. Here they suggest that we do 2d6 plus 6 times 6 times. And then kind of assigning them each, or they can use the array that they have standard. Their standard array for a life well lived suggests using an array of 14, 14, 12, 12, 10, and 8. And then, of course, we would add the various ability bonuses that we had here. So for example, if we put 14 and then 1, 2, so that'd be 16. Anyway, so here they suggest some finishing touches. Now that we've basically set up our basic character, we need to kind of bring them all together. So it says here, look back on all of your choices and experiences that you've picked thus far and summarize them all into a coherent sentence like, I am a diligent and perfectionist barkeep whose experiences among the planar elements as a child meant that I could calm a wyvern when it was frightened. So in this guy's case, I would probably say like, this character is a person who seeks to protect others and sees beauty in the world in places where others might miss. Right. With this statement, you're now ready to join the fray and set off on your adventure. If you would like to learn more about your character, the following sections provide finishing touches which can deepen your understanding of them, creating new story threads and informing your role-playing. So here, of course, there are some elements. These are optional elements, but we're going to go ahead and flip through them real quick just to see what all's here. So for this first one, it's entitled The Lies We Tell Ourselves. It certainly sounds like a really interesting section. Basically, these are going to be different beliefs and values that we stand by because we think they're correct. However, they might be misconceptions or misunderstandings. This could be a deeply held belief that shapes how we interact with the world that is not true. So down here, we have some like loose statements that then us or the game master would then, potentially utilize in some capacity to develop the story, introduce interesting character conflicts, and maybe eventually overcome this thing that's apparently potentially not true. So for example, I just rolled 20. My fear will destroy me if I let it. Which seems pretty fitting for a paladin, especially one who's already lost a family member, presumably because of war, and who also has someone who they desire to strongly protect from their family. So maybe this could connect back to that family or to another character in the party. That maybe there's this fear of loss. But also it could be some other fear that has not necessarily come up yet. So here, this is another section where they have skeletons in the closets. So these are various forms of secrets that might occur. So again, here it says, choose one secret from the table or roll determined randomly. So a lot of these are connecting back to things that happened in the past. So for example, I just rolled number 5. And it says here, you actually caused the events that led to your life lesson. Oh, no. Oh, that's really bad. So if you recall back to our life lesson, that was apparently our neighbor's house was burning down. So apparently we caused the fire in some fashion. Maybe that's related to our fear, that our fear the fear that will eventually destroy us, our fear of ourselves. Oh, goodness. Oh, that's funny. Oh, I kind of want to play this character now. Anyway, the next section is that which binds us. So this is specifically talking about connections. So these could be connections between the various characters in the party. These could be how characters met, how they first learned about one another or should trust one another. And basically this is kind of creating backstories of like what happened before, instead of having to go at we don't know anybody and we're all just meeting together because of this patron or because we're all meeting together in the tavern or whatever. So I rolled a 55 on the table here. 55 is here. It says, someone and I are related through family. Oh, that's interesting. So basically they're family members, distant cousins, something along those lines. All right. Now, of course, we don't want our characters just wandering around not really doing anything. So here we have a system where we could have goals. And of course, it's encouraged. So basically, this is adding an element of character development based around story instead of relying solely on XP from random events that you throw in as a game master or direct combat. So basically, this is kind of like milestones, right? But instead it's giving you experience points. So here we have short-term goals, and they give us different experience levels that they could potentially give us if we're utilizing that system. So here we have personal goals. So here are some personal goals that are specific to certain classes. So for example, this one, the first one here for Barbarian says, I feel fury guttering within me. I wish to stand atop the highest place in miles in the middle of a storm and shout into the gale, answering it with my own rage. Oh my. So basically, they want to engage with the fury of nature. That makes sense. Okay, popping over here to the Paladin. I'm going to go ahead and roll a d6, and we'll pick one of these at random. So 2, I wish to speak with my companions and those we encounter about their opinions on right and wrong. I can learn much by testing and challenging my own beliefs against those of others. Oh, so basically we wish to seek out and to debate and discuss with others in order to grow ourselves. Interesting. Okay. And then, of course, we also have longer-term goals. So these would be more sort of stretched out. Again, these are still personal, but they're more deeper into the future. These are more long-term things. Obviously, screaming into a storm is not exactly a long-term thing, right? So again, flipping over to the Paladin. I rolled a 2 again. So it says here, when a Paladin died, they lost a legendary weapon of my god. I wish to find it and to use it to honor them both. Okay, so basically we need to find some sort of artifact related to our god that's a previous member of our order lost. This one's interesting. This one right here. I wish I'd rolled a 6. I'm going to go ahead and read this one for you guys. It says, I regret making my oath, or I was pressured into it. I seek a final way to enact it, allowing me to leave it behind. It's like the oath sworn, or rather the oath breaker in like Baldur's Gate. Yeah. I don't want to be a paladin anymore. That is really interesting. Yes, that's really interesting. Okay. Oh, and then of course we have party goals, which could give us narrative rewards like different enemies and allies, fame and renown, personal change, so on and so forth. So it doesn't actually like give you any specific things to kind of help you think of them. They're just giving you some examples and various things that you could kind of connect narratively party goals. So that was A Life Well Lived. Thank you all for joining us again. Again, this was created by Cubicle 7 Games Entertainment. Let me double check. Cubicle 7 Entertainment. All right. They're actually an Irish company, I believe. So yeah, it definitely looks interesting. And that Lifepath, this is definitely a pretty useful. I wish some of the items had a couple more options. Like a lot of the tables, when you were doing things specific to classes, you were just rolling a d6. I understand why they didn't put in more, because if they did, then that would be like a really long thing. But it would be interesting to have a bit more variety, especially if you're a person who has the tendency to make characters who mainly shoot for the same class every time. But I mean, in some ways, one of the whole points of using this type of Lifepath system is specifically so that you can create something outside of your typical archetype wheelhouse. That's one of the whole reasons why I really enjoy Lifepath systems, and I really encourage people to use them when they're available. Is just because you might have a basic idea for a character that you might want to make, and you might, obviously you don't have to roll on every table. You might find choices that you pick that really fit that vision that you already have in your head. But you might get surprised and come up with a character who you really engage with, like we kind of did here with this paladin gnome who apparently I don't know, maybe they're a pyromaniac and accidentally burnt down their neighbor's house and then put the fire back out. So oh goodness. Or maybe they failed in their duty to like look after someone or do something, and that's what caused the fire to happen. But anyway, yes, I'm getting distracted. Anyway, that was a life well lived. Again, this was Cubicle 7 Entertainment. Thank you all for joining us, and don't forget to rate your itch purchases or drive through RPG or wherever you get your materials, and have a good zone.